Jimmy
Hey, Jim.
Evans is our next speaker. It's going to be an honor to hear from him. I heard Jimmy speak Southern Utah at one point. I think he spoke down there for the Soil Health Conference a couple years ago. Thought when I listened to him, like, man, this guy has a depth of knowledge. And so appreciate our team reaching out and appreciate that you accepted the invite to speak at this, Jimmy.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Jared. I'm very delighted to be here. I've listened here for quite a while this afternoon and uh, received a lot of knowledge and that I can take and apply here on the ranch myself. I farm and ranch in Northwest Oklahoma and multi-generation here as well. So I'm going to start sharing my screen here a little bit. And so we've heard a lot of knowledge today about managing yourself, managing the operation, building a resilient business. Um, I'm going to talk a little bit about how we manage our soil and how we manage our grass and our production. And weatherproofing your farm, keeping the raindrops where they fall, and that can apply to snow or what else. Because if you live in a limited rainfall area, that's your greatest need to grow grass, to grow beef, to grow production, to grow forage. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. Just a little bit of information about me as well. I also work for Trust in Food, a Farm Journal initiative. I'm the Senior Vice President at Climate Smart Programs for Trust in Beef, America's Conservation Ag Movement as well. So, multi-hat operation around here as well, just like others in this uh, session that we have today. What I really want you to think about today is um, do you look at this as an obstacle if you were the driver of this truck? Um, there's multi ways you can look at this. Most of us today would look at this as an obstacle. You can look at this as an obstacle or an opportunity. If you're driving this truck and you get pulled over, that may be an obstacle to getting to where you're going. Or is it an opportunity to explain your product and an opportunity to meet a new customer or friend? In agriculture, we have this ability to look at everything as an obstacle first. And I started down this regenerative journey about 15 years ago, whole hog, all jumped in. And I quickly learned if I will look at things as opportunity first and not an obstacle, that there is a lot of opportunities out there. And if we don't look at it that way, uh, things can pass us by. And when opportunities come and go, sometimes it's too late to really revisit that. And we should have had a broader perspective in what we think. And what I'm trying to really say is, are there more than one way to do things? In American agriculture, we've always tried to do it the way it's always been done. A friend of mine bought this tank at an auction and brought it home this way. Now, if you look at the pickup, it's got a ball hitch on it. If you look at the trailer, it's got a ball hitch. The tires are up. The wheel bearings are fine. It was very secure. But most people would have just hooked on and pulled it home because it's a trailer. There are multiple ways to do things. And if we're going to change and be progressive, and I heard Jared talk about this today, I heard the last two or three speakers talk about, evaluating your program, thinking outside the box, look at the whole scheme of opportunities that you have that you can create. And that's what we tried to do at our farm and ranch. When we started changing our soil, it really changed our lives. And, you know, getting closer to Mother Nature, stopping and smelling the roses and listening to the birds sing, uh, really start thinking holistically and looking at the entire operation. I grew up in a system that was on the left. This is one of my classmates that I went to school with on the left. If you'll look at up in that top corner of that left-hand picture, you'll see the stubble field across the road. That's the one on the right. That's me. We're neighbors and friends. There's an old way to do it. I think I found a better way to do it. And I'm going to talk about that as we go through the day to really show you how I look at soils, look at grass, look at crops. I want something green growing. You see, I've harvested a wheat crop there, and I've already got my cover crop coming up. So that was flown on in between before harvest. But I'm going to show you that the operation on the left is mine. This is my classmate on the right across the road. Same rainfall. Same, we're just a pathway apart, but do we have effective rainfall? When we say we got 2 inches in the rain gauge, did we get 2 inches in the soil to grow with? This is up in Kansas. These are two neighbors up there. Michael Thompson on the left, a conventional grower on the right. This is Alejandro Carrillo in Mexico. If you look at this, look at the rock layers that are showing up here, growing agave. That's the way they've always grown it. Is there another way to do that? Is there a way to stack enterprises in that field to make it more productive, where you have several streams of revenue? Same rainfall, same area, different approaches, different management. Does a desert have to be a desert, or can it be a lush pasture? These are all from Alejandro, a good friend of mine. Can we create atmospheres where micromanagement can cause rainfall patterns to be different? Why does it always rain in a rainforest? Because there's something green growing, lush. It's cycling water in the small water cycle. In the desert, it rains very seldom because typically there's not much green growing plants in there. Is that management or is that weather? It can be a little bit of both, and it can be a lot of management. So I had to learn things that's out of my control. How do I manage that? Action of others, what people think, what happens around me. I've got to realize if I'm going to manage my farm and ranch, what is in my control. I can't manage the weather. I can't manage the markets. But what I can control is my thought, my actions, what I give my energy to, the goals I set, my boundaries. How do I handle challenges? We heard about that earlier today in conference. So that's what I really try to focus on. What's in my control? Can I control how much water I take in? To a point I can. And when I read my rain gauge and people ask me how much rain did I get, can I say all of it? I'm not saying we can take a flood. I'm going to show you instances of that. But I'm just saying we need to make our rainfall the most effective that we can. So we cannot force someone to hear a message that they're not ready to receive. But we must never underestimate the planting of a seed. And that is so true. That is so true. We just got to plant seeds of thoughts with you guys to really learn how to manage. And so that's what I do. In my crop production land, I always plant a seed. Whether it's raining or where it's not, if I can get it up, I'll plant it because I want that small water cycle working. I want, as Dr. White will tell you, that all these crops will grow biofilms and hydrogels that really put water, so the biology is protected. That hydrofilm is non-evaporable, and that's the reason we see resilience built into the system. And we see that once you get into a good systems approach, you start seeing this. Now, I'm going to step back in time here just a little bit to 15 years ago when we first started. This is our very first cover crop. Now, remember, my neighbor that was in the first slide across the road, and this is the same field, likes to keep his land bare in the fallow period. A lot of ranchers like to keep their grass very short. They understand that grass growing, that is beef, that's something to sell. But taking it all is not the option. And I'm going to show you what I learned by simulating this. So we've got a moisture probe and a temperature probe right behind me there where the flag is. And back behind Colita, over her shoulder there, you'll see another flag sticking up. So we're monitoring, measuring water in, water out, temperature of the soils, and how we manage the land. Now you got to remember, where I grew up, we were taught that clean fallow period saves water, because if you're trying to grow something 365 or as long as we can, you're going to use water. That is true, but what we didn't take into consideration was the evaporation rates. It's easy to see water coming down, but it's very hard to see it going away. So that same field, the next spring after we terminated the cover crop and planted wheat back, and I love my artist drawing here around this very pretty square, but you can really see the difference in the wheat. Now we're still in a mega drought in 2011 and 12. Now, Noble Research Institute, Jim is with me here with his back to us. My NRCS DC is standing there with us. And Jim says, "What's going on in this square?" And I said, "Well, Jim, you're the Research Institute. Help me figure this out." And he said, "Well, there's something definitely going on here, because outside of that, where we had cover crops, it was much, much better." So what we done, and the NRCS said, we need a probe. So he went and got a probe. We probed around, and it was a hard layer underneath this soil profile. Once we moved outside that square, the probe would go all the way in. So we went and got a Giddings probe, and we probed that. And what the core samples showed us was where we had bare soil, we only had 16 inches of moist dirt in the profile, and where we had cover crops, we had 33 inches. I want to tell you that was a game changer for me. And we've done this in rangeland too. And I will tell you it's the same if you manage your grass. I'm just showing you what's happening in cropland today. But what did that really mean to my wheat crop growing was when they took that back and weighed it and dried it out in the lab and re-weighed it, it showed there was 4.6 inches of water in the profile where we had no cover crops, and where we had cover crops or more residue on the ground, we had 7.5 inches. 3 inches can make a lot of difference if you're trying to grow grass or if you're trying to grow crops. So we quickly learned some key points. We had residue on the ground and had something growing, and this was last summer at 113-degree ambient temperature. I can keep that profile near the surface about 80 degrees. 75 degrees is optimal for biology to work. Across the road in my neighbor's bare field, it was 130 degrees, 129. Biology cannot survive that. And I tell everybody, if you had a flat tire on an asphalt road and it was 113 degrees outside, would you change that tire right there? Or if you pulled up 100 yards and there was a shade tree that you could pull under, would you change it there? Most of us would limp up there and change it in the shade because we wouldn't want to work in 130-degree weather. Then probably would be more than that uh, on an asphalt. This is south of me, about 80 miles at Alan Mindemann's farm. And I want to show you how the water cycle is really supposed to work. So we were having a field day there. By the way, that's a soil scientist, Greg Scott, in the pit. And you'll see that that looks very hard in the bottom. That's sandstone. So this is all the soil that Alan has to work with. And if you look at the banks there, you'll see about 20 inches of darkening layer, and that's carbon moving down from a good system. And we actually got run out of the field that afternoon because a rainstorm come. But I want you to look around the edge of that pit and see the huge berms. Now, Alan dug that morning with a track hole in a big hurry right before we started the field day. So it come a big downpour. Now, this water didn't fill the pit, and I wished I would have took in that pouring rainstorm, went out there and took a camera and filmed it. Water was pouring in the sides of this pit like nozzles off a spray nozzle, where the earthworm burrows, the old root channels, and everything. So it was coming down outside of the pit, going down, and it'll come out the least resistance. That's the way the water cycle should work. Most of us think to fill a pond, it's got to run off the top, out of the field, down the ditch, into the pond. It should go in the profile and come out least resistance in the creek. And I'm going to show you an example of that here in a minute. This was a game changer again for me to think about how we look at soil. Okay, so Jim was talking about we're taking in 2-inch rainfall here in about 20 minutes. Now, this was about 4 years in, and he's put a second inch in now, and it's taking about 10 minutes for that to go in. So can we take a 4-inch rainfall in 2 hours and take that all in? And I'm saying you can when you really start working at that. Here we are in Tennessee they call this field the Garden of Eden. These are soybeans, and I am standing in this field. This was absolutely the best crop I've ever saw in my entire life. Now, everybody says, how do you do that? So if you look down into the canopy here, you see all this rye residue on the surface. And to understand the points I'm trying to get at here, if I'll take and pull that rye back, well, I'm sorry, I got the wrong order here. I'm going to talk about the power of steel rye here. And this is Rick Clark, and I'm going to go back to that slide in just a second. So why do we use cereal rye at 12 inches? If you were going to buy the 82-pound in that it creates at 12 inches, it costs you $82. If it's 18 inches tall, if it's 28 inches tall, and Rick clipped this and sent this into a lab and had this diagnosed of what the nutrients were in this rye. If it's dead, even afterwards, as it's breaking down, it's still releasing nutrients. And these were based on 100 pounds of rye that he planted. And that was in 22. Now, back to that slide, I pulled that residue back and looked at the surface of this soil. Look at all the earthworm holes, look at all the porous material that it's building aggregates in that soil. And on my microscope on my phone, if you look at it that day, then this is what it looks like at 200 power. So when we talk about airflow into the soil, water infiltration rates, this is what you want it to look like. That way you can take it in. As the biology is working, and Dr. Haney measures CO2 respiration to get the numbers of the biology by the respiration of the CO2. Well, they're like us. We can't be in a garage and have our vehicle running if we can't get rid of the CO2. So they've got to have gas and airflow here. So it's not only being porous to get water in, it's to get oxygen in and it's to get CO2 out. So if I go across the road in Tennessee to the neighbor that's a good no-till farmer without cover crops, really managing the soil, this is what his looks like. A very good soybean crop. But if I look at the surface of this field, it's the same soil profile. Where is the water going to go? No cover crops, no management of the soil. If it rains today, a 2-inch rainfall, is he going to get 2 inches? Only in the bar ditch and only in the creek. It's not going in here. If I look at with my magnifying 200 power, that's not the moon. That's that same surface. This is what I'm trying to get you to understand. And if we look at both of them soils side by side, see the life on the left, see how porous that is, see any roots on the right. And I dug this in the middle of the furrow on 30-inch rows. You see how there's hardly no porous aggregate stability in that on the right. These are popular tools in agriculture today, and everybody says it makes a wonderful seed bed. Dwayne Beck at Dakota Lakes will tell you that this one pass will reduce your water infiltration by 50%. If you really think about aggregates, if you took a I don't know how many of you like breakfast cereal, but Cocoa Puffs really makes a good demonstration of this. If you'll put your bowl or put your cereal in a glass and pour milk in it, it will infiltrate all the way down to the bottom really quickly. If you'll take them Cocoa Puffs and crush them up into fines and pour the milk on top, that's where it'll stay. So it's a really good test. But another point I want to make here is in 1947, this tornado come into our small town of Leedy, Oklahoma, and they saw it coming. And this is what happened. If you look at this, there's no infrastructure left. There's no water for them. There's no electricity. There's no way these people can really work like biology works. On the left, the biology is alive. On the right, it's not. So I'm always going to plant. I'm always going to grow when I can, but I'm going to graze it. I'm going to use polywire. I may stack the cattle up, but we want to leave residue back. And remember, I also said that this works for snow. When I get snow here in Oklahoma, we normally get a 40 or 50-mile-an-hour wind. So we don't want to trample that all to the ground. We want some of that up to catch snowfall. We want our surface to look like this. And this could be rangeland. This could be grass. This actually is a warm season mix, but that's the way I want my pastures to look also. I want a big sponge there on the ground to take that water in. And I want to give the biology the best opportunity they can to live and to free up nutrients for me. All I want to do then is cut a slight slot in it, drop a seed in to grow something. For a warm season mix for me to rest my native pastures, this works very good for me. These are pictures from here just the last few months here in Oklahoma. These are multi-species cover crops because I believe in mimicking Mother Nature. I want lots of diversity in my rangeland. Same thing in my cover crops. But it also, in the background, you'll see my neighbor, my classmate. Again, this is the same set of slides from the same fields. But I also want to stack the story, and the story being the profile of the cover crops. If you'll look down into this photograph, you'll see a bunch of real low growing proso millet in the bottom. And I want to stack that as it grows so I have stock density in that to graze. But then when it goes to not raining. And everybody says, oh, yeah, Jimmy, I tried to tell you, you couldn't do that here in Oklahoma because, we don't get enough rainfall. Crops are struggling, my cover crops, and I'm starting to look like, wow, maybe the neighbor's right. But we're going to continue to plant. We get a little rain, I jump back in where I hadn't planted and I'll plant again because I can take the rainfall in. Starts looking a little better, and then we got a good rain. So now I have lots of winter forage growing for my cows. I'm actually weaning calves on this particular track. Right now we're doing fence line weaning in this here. We'll have all our calves weaned. We just got a frost the last couple of nights. So we're not going to be quite as lush here as we was just a few weeks ago, but the calves are really doing well. Another field that we had with a different mix in it. This here is going to be for winter grazing through and to save buying a bunch of groceries for my cows out on the land this winter. Now we're going to get down to how I know I'm taking it all in. I have two center pivots along the river. We're putting 2 inches on with this pass. The center pivot, I'm standing right at the pivot. It's coming towards me. We just got 4.5 inch rainfall during the night. I drove down to shut this pivot off early that morning. But look behind there. You see no standing water, no runoff water. And we had equivalent of 4.5 inches in about 4.5 hours. So I went and got my soil scientist with NRCS, two soil scientists there, and then we wanted to document it with the film crew with Macy there on the left. So we parked this pivot stationary, and I'm proving that in the photograph because that sprinkler is anchored in the ground with a sharpshooter. I've got a GoPro camera up above that. You'll see there. So we're proving that we're not moving. I put 7 inches on in an hour and 54 minutes with that pivot not moving. That's a 4-foot wagon wheel that I've adapted to be a ring that we drive into the ground. So this hour and 54 minutes later, we shut this off. The rain gauge is plumb full. It's been running over for a little bit. The water quickly goes away. You'll notice up in the top outside the wheel, there's a little bit of water standing there. And literally it went away while the soil scientists then dug in the middle of this ring to see how fast and how far it was going down. Because we do these practices, this is what that profile looks like in this field. And this is the carbon that we're seeing that we're capturing and moving down. Now, this was very hard to hold together because this soil is so porous now, and it's pretty fragile. It'll come apart. But we like about 4 inches left of getting this carbon moved down to the original plow pan in this soil. But if you'll look on the right there, you'll see earthworm holes into that, and you'll see darkening streaks within that soil profile. That's the earthworms moving that carbon down. They mix that. And if you look on the left, you'll see earthworm castings coming out of the earthworm holes there of the light colored soil. And they're the ones that really mix that for us. So to tell the story in this field is Steve Allspaw. Was my state soil scientist. He's just retired. And this is what he found that day, that the original soil survey mapped this field as it used to fluvent that were a very young soil, about 500 years old, that typically didn't have a very dark surface. And he didn't see this 8 years ago when we started this project. But today he sees a very dark soil now that we can reclassify a molic that's a fluvitic haptosoil. I see this, Jared, all over the country that people are changing their soil classification. Now, not every NRCS office is going to want to reclassify and come out because, first of all, they don't believe it can happen. I was very proud of Steve that recognizing that we have changed that. David Brandt got his soil reclassified in Ohio. I've got it reclassified, and I know there's a few others, but literally there's probably hundreds of producers in rangeland and cropland all across America that's done this. So what does that really mean? Well, my mom always talked about her crust when she was baking a pie. And I always told her I loved the filling. I didn't care about the crust. But how important is soil aggregation to soil health? Well, literally, it's everything because it's beginning of water infiltration, water holding capacity, carbon storage, keeping nutrients in the field where they're at. So if we get an 8 or 10 inch rainfall event, can we take it all in, or at least most of it? This will provide multiple benefits for future water to grow crops, nutrients that stay in the field, not downstream, and our soil stays in place. That is the key to really building resilience in the system. We can build the best business plan we have and mismanage our soil and not utilize the rain and the snow that God gives us, and it's not effective rainfall. So now I'm going to take you outside of my area to producers I've worked with across the country here and show you that it doesn't happen just in Oklahoma. This actually is in Southwest Oklahoma at a good friend of mine uh, that has done an excellent job. We actually had measured his water infiltration on the left that week before this rainfall event of 6 inches an hour. And when Russ Jackson called me that the morning that he saw this happening, his folks live in that house on the left. His neighbor's house is on the right down there behind them trees. He got 5.3 inch rainfall event. He has 6 inches an hour water infiltration rate. He has good crop rotation, cover crops, planned grazing, and management. His neighbor is a conventional tillage, clean till guy, small grains, no cover crops, no management, no grazing. Who do you think is going to have the best opportunity to grow the next crop here? The guy that stores 144,000 gallons an acre or 16,000 gallons an acre? 2 weeks after that first event, it rains another big rain event. We're coming out of the drought that we were in. Normally, what happens behind the drought? We have huge rainfall events. You can start seeing over on the left a little bit of puddling still in Russ's field as it's starting to slow down the infiltration because the profile is starting to get full. The water is draining away from us in this photograph, going down behind that house into a creek. When we had a Giddings probe out in Russ's field at 16 feet, we hit a gravel layer. When we pulled that gravel layer up, Russ said, "Oh my gosh, that's what the creek bed looks like behind mom and dad's house." Remember a while ago when I said it should go in and then it goes least resistance? Well, it comes out in the spring behind Russ's folks' house in the creek because that gravel layer is the creek bed. So when the profile gets full and it gets down there, the excess then goes out into the creek. And it was a real game changer for Russ. I turned around the other way. This is what the neighbor's field looks like the next day. It's crusted over. Look at all the nutrients and the turbidity in the bar ditch that the water's still draining out of the field. This is Russ's field across the road. Water is there. Russ is going to plant a cotton crop behind this, and what a cotton crop he had. This is in north central Oklahoma. Uh, uh, a great cattleman on the right, Mark Thomas and Annette. Conventional on the left. That conventional farmer on the left never planted that lake of water up through the middle of his field because it was always too wet there and it was too dry everywhere else. Mark and Annette had already planted their winter forage in this field, and the water stayed where it fell. Mark went out during just as soon as the rain was over and he captured water that was in his field as it was going down, captured water across in the neighbor's bar ditch. They actually sent these samples into a lab, high nutrients and bacteria on the left, very little nutrients, very little. The water quality was exceptional on the right. So it's not all about taking it in, it's also about the water quality that we're dealing with down the road. So it's really good management. I'm going to take you now to North Dakota in the Red River Valley. I've been working with Michael Larson on the left, 3 years when we took this picture. The Red River Valley is an old lake bed, glacier lake bed, that when the glacier receded and the water went away, everybody went to farming it because it was such flat bottom land. And they've just beat it to death, so to speak, on the right. If you'll look over here, Michael's only been on the left 3 years. Look at the difference in the water in the bar ditch and look out in the field. You see very little still standing in the field. There is just a little bit in the bar ditch, but nothing like's on the right. That's how quickly you can turn this around. And like I said, this applies to ranching as well. Now I'm going to take you to Jamestown, North Dakota, to a fellow Leopold winner of mine, Jeremy Wilson up there. And it has rained 14.5 inches in 12 hours in this field. A lot of this water is coming off a neighbor, and a lot of the sediment was caught with the residue about 3/4 of a mile up the stream. This is a video, and I know you can't hear it, so I'm going to commentate as I show you this video. It's just quit raining. Jeremy's went out. He's standing in this lower indention in the field. It's not a ditch. That's what I really want to point out. It's just a lowering. It swept a big area of his residue away, but the soil is aggregated and it's holding. And the water that's leaving, the profile is full, but it's clean. And Jeremy's actually took a drink of that water and he talked about how sweet it was. So my point being is, I'm not saying we can take it all in a big rainfall flooding event. Jeremy took about half of that in, of that 14 inches, before it started running out of the field. So this is what you can do. This is back at our farm in western Oklahoma. I had a sesame crop here that was late harvested in December, real late harvest last fall here. We planted cereal rye in December, and most people will tell you you can't grow rye planting it that late. I planted about 90 pounds because it was really late. This is in April. We had a good wet winter, a decent spring before everything cut off. So when it rained, I planted right directly into the rye. And these were soybeans that I planted. And I don't grow soybeans very often because I'm not in a soybean area. But it's kind of a double dog dare, so to speak. I try some different things. Really great residue on the ground. These are the soybeans in the early spring as they're growing. Much like in Tennessee, if you'll look down in here, look at the residue, they're blooming. We had a wonderful crop in the making. Uh, and then guess what? Summer heat caught us, the rain quit, and I did them soybeans didn't make, but I give them the best opportunity I could. But once again, I still got residue on the ground. My land's not blowing, it's not eroding it away. I know Jared talked about investments and cash flow and investments in your soil is the same way. I'm baking nutrients here. I'm banking water when I need it. A lot of times in Western Oklahoma, this is what it looks like. This is after a warm season cover crop. My point being today is we're running out of time to manage our soils and really regenerate our soils across the country. I truly believe that. They can only stand so much. And we can continue to just do nothing. It is impossible. I want to continue doing what I've always done. And I want to tell you today, you can just do it, that nothing's impossible. One of the greatest soil scientists that I had out on my field told me one day, he said, the only thing impossible on your ranch is something you won't try. If you won't try it, it's impossible. And I truly believe that. Has everything I've tried worked? I showed you a soybean field that failed. It did rain here in the fall, and I've got wheat growing in them soybeans. I didn't get a picture of that to show you today because I just can't show everything I want to show. But I had it managed to when it did rain, I could plant. Most producers in here want to take everything and leave fallow when the weather goes bad. In the summertime, hot and dry, I want to graze my grass off. I want to leave it bare. My goal is 365 if I can. I can't always. Mother Nature won't allow me to always do that. But that's a goal. And Jared, I rushed through a few slides there for a little bit ago. I'm going to stop right here if there's some questions. This is how you can get a hold of me. I always say long live the soil, and I actually trademarked that, but our
Nice.
lives really depend on it. We have to manage God's resources the best we can. I am giving away a couple of hour sessions, 2 hour sessions with me, strategy sessions for the first two people that will email me at this Jimmy Emmons at hotmail.com. So I'm going to kind of leave that up there for a minute, Jared. And
I like it.
so I've got, looks like to me, a few minutes left here
Yeah.
for some
Yeah.
questions.
Yep. And Margot also put that in the chat. That'll be a link over to what Jimmy offered. So where just interested, Jimmy, as you talked through this, when you go and you consult with somebody, where do you start? Like what's the you have a
Well,
common place, or does it depend on the person?
so the first question I ask them, uh, are you willing, are you going to try this systems approach and see if it works, or are you going to try to make it work? And it depends on how they answer that question,
Hmm. Hmm.
is it how much I'm willing to do. If they tell me, well, I'm going to try it and we'll see if it works, we got to have a pretty long conversation. If they'll tell me, I want to make this work, help me through that, I'll stay with them from till the cows come home. I'm not going to give up on them. And that's what it really takes. And to get people to understand, uh, Jared, when you and I took over the ranches and started managing them on our own, we had a great asset, and our generations before had give everything to it to manage it, and they done whatever it takes. And that's all I'm asking out of people is if you're going to change your thinking and change what's happening in between your ears and your mind, because this is a total mindset. because we got to throw out what we've been taught, even in soils class, to
Mhm.
understand how this works. You got to be dedicated. You got to be all in. And so that's kind of where I start.
What are the what's a common denominator for you that you see amongst the people that are highly successful?
It's the ones that's willing to change the quickest. Most of them are women that change
Hmm.
the quickest. And if you really think about that, it it's who wants to change the house color, who wants new shades, who wants a new recipe the quickest. Men tend to be give me a steak and potatoes, leave the house white. It's good enough. So
Yeah.
I see women changing. First generational people that come in that has no background really embrace this the most. I was 50 some years old when I started this journey. My
Uh,
father-in-law was
huh.
75 when he changed. So it's not age demographics. It's a mental. We talked about mental
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
summit earlier today. I really appreciate that because it is mental, and you have to drop everything. Just like Kirk said, everything behind you, you have to forgive. You have to forget that way. You've got to start now and move forward.
Hmm. I love it. That's good. Well, please type in the chat what you folks took away from Jimmy's presentation. Take that opportunity to teach each other. Jimmy, I always like to ask people what their definition of stewardship is.
So the definition of stewardship for
Your
me
own.
is taking care of God's land and looking at it as a complete ecosystem that's living, everything below ground and above ground. The thing I enjoy the most in life is going out and moving cattle around and just sitting there. Last night, Ginger and I moved some calves out on some new cover crops, and we just shut everything off and just sat there for about 30 minutes, listen to them pulling the forage up, listen to the birds singing, and when you know that you have a complete living system, when you can hear so much life, I've been to people's farms that it's just dead silent. And it is the kiss of death that when I hear that. So stewardship is really taking care of it as a whole living ecosystem, not just soil, not just plants. It's the biology, it's the birds, it's the wildlife, it's the animals, and it's us.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But that's really good. I think it is an honor to be involved in a business where we are so connected to the creations that God has made. And I know that, man, if you're a construction worker or work in IT, whatever it is, you can certainly receive inspiration. You can certainly do good for the world. And it's not saying we're better than anybody else or any other industries, but um, it's a connection that I'm glad that I have and that I can pass on to my children. It definitely helps you feel more grounded and it's something that is enduring. I
Yep.
believe it's these elements have always been here. They'll always be here. They're always going to change, and we get the opportunity to change it. Somebody asked a question earlier in a prior presentation, and we didn't get a chance to ask that, but um, and I know, as always, the answer is depends. But how long does it take to increase 1% soil organic matter in your soil?
So it's going to depend on where you're at and the quality of your soil. The better quality, the less degraded it is. If it's bottom land, it's going to be a lot quicker. I had some bottom land that I increased 1% in 3 years, 3.5 years. Uh,
Hmm.
Sandy soil, the upland had been highly eroded. It takes me about 5, 6, 7 years. It depends,
Okay.
and it also depends on rainfall. There's a lot of factors that because you can only change it by how much you can grow.
Hmm.
So the more limiting rainfall out where you're at uh, is a lot slower. and maybe it's
Yeah.
slower further south of you than
Yeah.
even where you're at in the desert region.
Yeah.
So that's all factors. Uh, and then understanding how cattle graze. People think that cattle, and they can be like people, they can be dumb at times. We put a GoPro camera on a heifer and watched her graze for 4.5 hours and then condensed that down to about a 4 minute video. If you get a
Uh-huh.
chance on YouTube, look at that cover crop cow. NRCS helped me do that. And when I do this live, I show that video, and this heifer walks through the crowd of yearlings up to this terrace, and she stops. And I tell everybody, if you were at a buffet, what would you do? And she looks to the right, she looks to the center, and she looks to the left and sat there a minute, and then she took off grazing. And she ate every species that we had planted, plus others is around the edge in that 4.5 hours. Now she ate more millets that day because the Brix level, the sugar level was the highest.
Hmm.
So understanding that they are just like us, they know what they like, they know what they need or what they think they need. And if you give them a diverse diet, they're going to balance that. And that's the reason cattle do so well in regenerative grazing, because they're getting a balanced diet. And most ranchers in overgrazed systems don't have a balanced diet. So you can build soil organic matter quickly where you have a balanced diet and have them cattle moving in the same way.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
long answer. I'm sorry, but
That that's perfect. Yeah, it definitely depends on our context where we're at and I think a lot, how much we're willing to do, how much we believe in it. And for me, I knew the concepts of management intensive grazing. I mean, Jim Garrish had been to our place. Um, but it probably took about a decade before I believed it. And then once I believed it, then the change was quick and it was easy. It was like, okay, this can be done. You can train cattle to electric fence. You can move them every day. You can figure out the water, all the reasons why it won't work. And so now with authority, when somebody says it can't be done, if they work for me, then I walk them through it and say, well, actually it can. Here's what you need to do. And if they don't,
absolutely.
I just smile and say, well, keep doing it your way. At some point, maybe you'll be open to change and then we can talk. So,
Yeah.
so
I
that,
see Lola in the chat there, Jared.
hmm.
Lola, you're proof that you're trying to get your husband to change. I see this all the time, and keep at it. You'll get him to change uh, in your operation. Love to talk to you sometime.
Perfect. Well, Jimmy, thank you. This has been a great addition. It all starts with the soil, right?
It
God's
does.
given us these elements. We can improve upon them. We're made of the dust. We can change ourselves. We can change the soil. We can change our businesses, change our relationships. And what a tremendous opportunity. So we certainly appreciate you being here with us. So if you guys would just, yeah, send him some gratitude in the chat, let him know of your appreciation. And again, your key takeaways from this. Jimmy, it's been an honor.
Well, thanks a lot, Jared. Appreciate it. Long live the soul, everybody, and enjoy it. Enjoy the rest of
Okay.
the conference and the summit here. Great speakers the rest of the day and tomorrow. So enjoy it, learn, live long. Thank you.